Okay, so I have called the camera store and I have put a pre-order in for the GH6, and I thought, why not make a video as to why I picked the GH6. So here are my, YouTube typical, 5 reasons I picked the GH6. Reason number 1, lenses. And while lenses in Micro Four Thirds could be, OM-1 or the GH6, the reality is that when I look at the lenses I'm considering buying, I'm more considering buying Lumix lenses than I am Olympus. There's going to be some back and forth, obviously, but there's definitely some huge advantages with the GH6 to buy lenses that have that declicked aperture ring. So that means that I'm able to go and declick. I'm able to use that manually, whereas on some of the Olympuses you can't do that. You have to sort of control it from the body, and that's not as ideal. I know it's a little minor one, but it's definitely one to consider, and I thought, save the best for last, right? Is slow motion. Now, I know I can get some slow-mo on my iPhone here, and I know I can get some kind of slow-mo in some of my other cameras. However, being able to just get a 4K 120 frames per second and 1080p 240, 300 frames per second and just constant roll without having to worry about when action's happening is actually a significant advantage to me, because I actually make stock footage, and being able to get that creamy motion for B-roll is definitely a selling point for me in terms of I can get bank on that feature. So number 3 is all the crazy built-in video features like the audio menu, the waveforms, the vector scopes, the fact that you can have it set for shutter angle, and that autofocus actually works in video. Again, we'll see how well it works, but it actually does work in video, where I have a lot of other cameras that do really good autofocus for photos, but as soon as you click it into video, results may vary. So that is definitely high on my list in terms of reasons I'm getting the GH6 over, again, the OM-1, and to a lot of extent, a lot of other cameras out there. It's just simply the video features are there to make this a video-centric camera that I can use. Number 4, and yes, I've switched to gloves because it is cold outside. It's been snowing all day and it just sort of stopped, so I was like, come out, jump out, get a video before you end up with snow flowing across your face the whole time. And number 4 is actually photography, and there's a very specific reason I'm picking this over the OM-1 for photography, because the OM-1, if you're just doing photography, is definitely the better choice. I'm sorry, Panasonic, but phase detect and stack sensors are going to win every day over pretty much anything else right now. But with the GH6, it is 25 megapixels, and it does have that 100 megapixel, old stilly stacking thing that actually, from everybody reviewing so far, says works really, really well. And for me, I look at saying, I don't need 60 megapixel photos all the time. I don't need to go and get all these high megapixel stuff, but when I want it, it's there. Very important. And again, with 25 megapixels, I can do some cropping and still get a good image out of it, especially if I'm imaging, say, little tiny birds, or I'm imaging things far away that I just simply cannot get reach, although with some of the lenses I'm looking at, it could go up to 800 millimeter equivalent full frame. Reach might not be a problem, but it's there and I can compose and whatnot, and I don't have to worry about cropping it too much like I would with the OM-1. Simply put, 20 megapixels is nice, 25 megapixels is even nicer, and 100 is obviously handheld. It's going to beat 50 megapixels any day. Again, semantics to a certain extent, but those features are really nice in the GH6. Number 5 is that onboard cooler. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but the reality here is that the cooler the sensor is, the cooler electronics are, the less noise is going to be in your final image or video. One of the issues that nobody seems to be talking about when they're talking about all these cameras that are overheating and they're pushing them to the extremes and all this other stuff is that as the camera heats up, it actually introduces electronic noise into your final image or video. You hear people talking about, oh, like S-Log3 is so noisy on this camera. Well, partly it's noisy on the camera because, you know, it is log and it's trying to capture all that noise to give you the purest image possible, but it's also noisy because that camera, probably running at 48 to 53 degrees Celsius on the internal, is just baking the electronics. And I know, yeah, you can flick that switch to say, oh, I can run at really high temperatures, but the reality here is that you got to ask yourself, how long is that camera going to last if you're constantly running it at like 50, 60, 70 degrees? I don't know what the top temperature on that camera, those cameras are, because it is, you know, camera specific. But I'm like, I'd rather have a cooler in there and know this camera's going to run cool all the time versus going and using a camera where I'm like, the noise profile of this camera is going to be temperature dependent on how long the shutter is rolling or how many pictures I'm taking, or if I happen to be using the SD cards or a CF Express card, because those cards get hot. So realistically, I'm not a big fan of cooking cameras any more than I need to. So having a cooler, actual cooling system in that camera makes me much more confident that that camera is going to operate in all the crazy weather conditions that I can think of during the summer, and that to me is a big value. So there's one final bonus, because we have to have a bonus, right? And that is that while I never suggest that you buy a camera with promised firmware, because oh boy, I've seen that kick people in the butt before, myself included. Like, yeah, send the camera back and pay like a couple $100 to get the upgraded firmware. Ugh, so annoying, right? But the GH6 actually has a bunch of firmware coming out that they've already announced, and you know, I asked one of the Panasonic reps, is this going to be a send the camera back or pay for it? And the answer was no, which is good, because even if it takes like 6 months to a year to get some of those features into the camera, it means that the GH6 is going to have a much longer functional shelf life than maybe some other cameras out there. Things like being able to save to SSD drives, you know, means that I can save a lot of money in CF Express cards and other sort of fast media by going out and buying an SSD, because SSDs are pretty cheap compared to memory cards. Another great advantage is that they're talking about, you know, bringing the ProRes through all the different sizes. Now, I'm not a big ProRes user, but that's a good thing to have for later when I want to use ProRes, not having to be stuck at the 5.7K. And there's always other stuff that they like to throw in and update, which is always going to be good because you know the camera's going to be updated. Whereas with the OM-1 and Olympus, I haven't seen as many updates or talks about firmware updates from that side, and I worry that while the camera is amazing today, what you're buying is all that you're going to get. And that's not a bad deal, but it's not a great deal in today's cameras. I'm going to walk here for a second before I close out this video, step over this fence, yes, stepping over fences, and basically saying, so those are my, I guess now 6 reasons why I'm getting the GH6 over the OM-1. I really, really like the OM-1, and I would love to get my hands on both of them to try them out, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I am a hybrid shooter, I do photos and video, so there's a certain takeaway of saying, I kind of want to get the best of both worlds, even if I'm sacrificing a little bit on both ends. Now, let me know in the comments below if you agree with me or not. If you're like a diehard OM fan, let me know. If you're like, yes, the GH6, cool. Please be sure to subscribe because I've got the camera on pre-order, and once I get it, I'm going to be making a ton of videos, and if I get enough YouTube traffic, I will go out and get the OM-1 as well. I will do a detailed comparison between the two, and I'll be honest, as I said in a previous video, they really do complement each other, so it'd be great to have two, but obviously you kind of have like, no one here has like $5,000 in their pocket to go out and buy 2 cameras, because if you did, you'd probably buy a full frame camera. Let's be honest, you would. But here's my next video coming up. Be sure to give it a watch, and as always, thanks for watching.